The map spread across the heavy oak table in the Kremlin's inner sanctum wasn't drawn in Moscow. It had been drafted decades earlier, standardizing a long game that Western leaders, blinded by election cycles and quarterly profits, were never equipped to see. To the world, October 1973 was a chaotic outbreak of Middle Eastern war, an emotional, retaliatory oil embargo by Arab nations reacting to American military aid. But behind closed doors, the fuse had been lit in Soviet Russia. Communist intelligence handlers fed Egyptian leadership a steady stream of fabricated intelligence reports, manipulating Cairo's military assessments, exaggerating Western vulnerabilities, and quietly provoking the Egyptian plan to attack Israel. The conflict was never meant to be a simple regional engagement. It was engineered to trigger a global catalyst. To the architects of the strategy, 1973 was simply Phase 1, the stress test. They needed to know what would happen to the machinery of Western civilization if the black blood pumping into its engines was suddenly squeezed. The results exceeded every projection. Within weeks, gas lines wrapped around American city blocks. Stock markets crashed. The Western financial system buckled, exposing a vulnerability so profound it reshaped global power overnight. The test proved a single truth. Whoever controls the flow of oil controls the West. With Phase 1 verified, the planners moved to Phase 2, positioning the trap. A stress test was useless if you couldn't permanently hold the valve. The Western world relied on the Shah of Iran, America's anchor in the Persian Gulf, to guard the most critical choke point on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. Through this narrow neck of water passed nearly a fifth of the world's petroleum. As long as the Shah stood, the weapon could only be borrowed, never truly owned. He had to fall. Behind the scenes, ideological agitators were activated. The Tudeh Party, explicitly allied with and directed by Soviet communist handlers, embedded themselves within Iran's factories, oil fields, and student movements. Operating as Moscow's primary ideological proxy on the ground, the Tudeh networks organized massive strikes across the oil sector, fanning the flames of revolution and paralyzing the nation's economy. They provided the muscle, the logistics, and the street-level momentum that destabilized the monarchy. When the Shah fled in 1979, the Western press reported it as an unexpected regional uprising. In reality, a primary Western pillar had been pulled down. The Islamists who swept into power were ruthless, purging the very communist operatives who helped clear their path. But the strategic objective had already been achieved. America's watchdog in the Gulf was dead. The Western ally was replaced by a regime whose foundational doctrine was hostility toward the West. The gateway to the world's energy supply had been moved into hostile hands. Then came Phase 3, the handoff. Over the following decades, as Moscow shifted and Beijing rose, the board evolved, but the script remained unchanged. Communist China, hungry for energy and locked in a long war for economic dominance against the United States, inherited the master arrangement. China supplied Iran with the tech, weapons, anti-ship missiles, and economic lifelines needed to fortify the Strait of Hormuz into an absolute fortress. In return, Tehran guaranteed Beijing the one thing it needed to pull the trigger when the time was right: leverage. Today, standing on the shoreline of the strait, looking out at the massive tankers gliding through the narrow shipping lanes, the entire arc becomes clear. It was never a series of disconnected historic accidents. Not the Soviet-engineered shock of '73, not the Tudeh-fueled revolution of '79, nor the modern Beijing-Tehran axis. It was a slow, 50-year encirclement. The test in 1973 showed how easily the West could be brought to its knees. The revolution in 1979 placed the knife against the artery, and today, the hand holding the blade is simply waiting for the order to cut. Phase 4. Operation Epic Fury, breaking the board. For nearly half a century, The strategy relied on Western leaders playing by the established rules of containment and incremental diplomacy. The West managed the squeeze, paid higher energy costs, and adapted to constant low-level brinkmanship in the Persian Gulf. Then came the countermove. In early 2026, President Donald Trump launched Operation Epic Fury, a campaign explicitly designed to shatter the 50-year architecture before the trap could be fully sprung. Rather than engaging in prolonged proxy skirmishes, the operation bypassed traditional diplomatic channels and targeted the mechanism holding the Western economy hostage. The operation targeted the core pillars of the regional leverage architecture, neutralizing the chokepoint. U.S. naval and air forces moved systematically against Iran's maritime assets in the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz. Within days, the naval apparatus Iran had assembled to threaten global oil shipping was crippled, stripping Tehran of its primary tool of economic extortion. Dismantling the arsenal, wave after wave of precision strikes targeted the IRGC's underground ballistic missile facilities, drone networks, and air defense installations, the very systems built up with foreign support to fortify the region. Severing the command network, decapitation strikes against key military command nodes aimed to paralyze the leadership capable of issuing an order to choke off global energy supplies. From the perspective of the grand narrative, Operation Epic Fury was an attempt to kick over the entire chessboard. By directly destroying the military hardware and naval presence dominating the strait, the operation sought to forcibly pull the blade away from the West's vital artery.